Hello, everyone. This is Claudiu Murgan, and today is a big day for me. I'm launching my third book, Crystal Cloud, which is the sequel to Water Entanglement. My guests today are Kaz Lefave, author of the Nemesis series, and Martin Bush, author and climate change action advocate. Tonight's event is not only about my book, but about the main ideas that intertwine in my writing: water/environment and outer states of consciousness that will impact our way of treating nature and treating ourselves. This is my first virtual launch, so I have my son Theo working behind the scenes, helping me, reading your comments and questions. When you have those, he will point them to me and we'll try to answer. You can make questions for Cass, for Martin, or for myself, or for three of us. Kaz and Martin, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Nice to be here.
So a couple of words about Crystal Cloud. I really enjoyed writing the book, as I always have something new to learn. It happened with the decadence of our souls and with water entanglement. And to give you a hint about what's going on in Crystal Cloud, the book continues with the same characters: Cherry Mortinger, the limnologist; Ilanda Mazandir, the neurosurgeon who looks into the crystal technology. And while the research for discovering the language of water is still going on, the book focuses more on the crystal implant technology and how that can benefit us as human beings. Without further ado, I will read a couple of pages from the book, and then we'll start the discussion with my guests. So I will read from chapter 1. In Cherry Mortinger's nightmares, water and wind faced off as howling tornadoes, hurricanes, and torrential rainstorms in battle. Shards of ice mercilessly pierced metal roofs, brick buildings, and flesh, mincing everything senseless in its path. Wind unleashed a ruthless interrogation of water as it demanded proof of humanity's innocence for misdeeds that happened not so long ago. Water screamed and twisted, but refused to break her silence. She would rather endure blow after blow, suffering, intimidation, and abuse for mankind's mistakes. Neither side would relent, forcing Cherry to wake in a cold sweat, knowing her beloved Earth was left the innocent victim every time. Cherry gasped at the vividness of the memory of these nightmares, even at noonday, and the clarity of her responsibilities as an activist became more evident. She knew water's humanistic secret. Its cryptographic patterns remembered every evolutionary cycle on Earth, every birth of a child, every thought of doubt or happiness. Water had witnessed timid and supple seedlings of oak, beech, sycamore, silver maple, European ash, Douglas fir, and more grow into old forests at liberty to expand unencumbered. No one had challenged the forest for its obsession of conquering new lands and claiming its own. Far into the past, water did not cry. Only much later, water witnessed the decimation of the wise over story and learned about pain, suffering, and senseless death. Her memory was changed forever, now storing the history of the planet and its civilizations. Water's innocence melted in a fuzzy molecular structure that science only recently classified as unhappiness. From the safety of her bungalow's windowless office room in Toronto, Cherry shook the nightmare from her mind and stood firmly. She glanced over at Heine's mask for the first time since the United Nations resolution related to the awakening of water and its repercussions on Earth had passed. "I am a limnologist and water activist," she said aloud as if to remind herself of her credentials in the unstable world. "I am registered with Water for All, and I should be able to handle this." She shook her head. Who was she kidding? She could barely keep track of the environment changes threatening the collapse delicate ecosystems all over the world. She perused through the reports on her iPad screen. Reports from Brazil, Peru, southern US states, China, and India, issued by environmental agencies or not-for-profit entities, were beyond frantic, all pointing to the enormous ecological stress from continuous deforestation, wildfires, increased dead zone in the oceans, or uninterrupted rains followed by devastating tornadoes. Unable to ignore the hysteria or deny her research, she brushed the moisture from her upper lip and turned away. It's quantum entanglement. The structural changes at the molecular level in the Ganges River that had replicated within hours to those of the Jordan River left no doubt in Cherry's mind that the quantum entanglement concept applied to almost anything else in nature. Quantum characteristics such as storing information, self-information, and organizing prove the behavior nature of an organism. Only certain scientists understood this, Cherry included. Now the media seem to be catching on, even labeled the phenomenon the awakening of water. She envisioned the UN resolution signed by all member countries would be a welcome respite from a GDP-focused mentality that had driven the economies and the consumerism to dizzying heights. The awakening of water had given everyone the necessary slap in the face. For the last 6 months of 2057, the occurrences in Asia and South America of water changing its molecular structure has ceased, thus reinforcing the compliance of all UN signatories. She picked up the mask and held it reverently in her hands. Now, using her hidden identity as Hayin, Cherry aimed to deliver a friendly yet firm message to her followers, while the world's biggest companies were still busy negotiating compensation for the loss of profits. It was a stratagem that, as long as the politicians continue to turn a blind eye, would be inserted in major trade agreements between powerful countries. Cherry compared this approach to a polite dinner guest who suddenly turns nasty, claims ownership of her house, and demands a hefty payment before leaving. At any moment, any of the other guests might make a similar claim, leaving Cherry miffed and broke, both emotionally and financially. Cherry pulled out an external microphone and plugged it into her tablet. Her hacker friends in the anonymous group would make the message available, posting it in a location that couldn't be traced back to her. Seeing renowned companies haggling over a dry bone and human DNA feature too hard to remove was still a sore sight for the 8.5 billion people who had no choice but to endure the consequences of the world's major industries coming to a halt. She clenched her fist several times, using Hayin's identity to provide hope through a period of hardship and to let everyone know that she's still watching the international players, subdued by the awakening of water crisis, still made her uncomfortable. Certain economies had to be saved, not bailed out. Cherry had read how this had happened many times in the past. Financial giants, those backing products with money that seemed to be pulled from thin air, owned the politicians. Tired of being told what to do by companies controlling their purse strings, governments had agreed to accept nationalization. It was a concept hated by those who had embraced crony capitalism to justify their outrageous and unethically generated profits. She clutched the mask to her breast and breathed in the familiar smell of the wood. I'll stop here. It's, yes, written for 2057, 2058, but these things are happening now. So it's sad.
Yeah.
So,
You predicted it. It's already happening.
Yes. Kaz, I write about the state of the oceans and the big areas of like dead zone, these blobs which are getting together, forming even bigger dead zones. In your series, Nimicin, you also wrote about this, and why did you, I mean, in your future, there are no oceans, only a toxic flooded landscape of dead water. Why did you choose such a striking solution?
Well, the in our past, let's say the Permian Triassic period, the entire planet was covered with hydrogen sulfide. So we were already in that state. So our oceans had essentially died as well. They had gone anoxic. And based on the research and the number of dead zones growing and growing, I had the thought, like you did, is what if they all connect? What if there's one big dead zone? What would happen to our planet ecologically? And that's what came out. So that's where the setting came from. Not a pretty sight.
So in other words, the blobs, the dead zone merged in all the oceans, and the end of marine life occur.
Yeah, so like we have on our coastlines, we can see the dead zones from space, and you can see the algae blooms. They just started covering more and more area, and so more and more of the bottom of the ocean was dying, was going anoxic. So eventually, the whole ocean just went. The heat as well. I mean, we're experiencing the heat right now. The ocean is warming, and that doesn't help things.
Yes. And before I go to Martin, just to let everyone know that if you make a comment on Facebook, your name will be put into the draw for 2 signed copies of Crystal Cloud. So go ahead, again, you can ask a question or just say hi, and your name will be entered in the draw. Thank you. So Martin, you spend a lot of time in Africa looking at climate change and renewable projects. Give us a little bit of overview of what you encounter there compared to other continents. You are on mute, Martin. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, the situation is pretty bad everywhere. I think. I don't know if there's any one continent that's in a worse situation than the others. I mean, we've got wildfires on all the continents except Antarctica. Antarctica is the odd man out, as it were. Thankfully, isolated, horribly cold, and protected from the enormous heat waves and problems that the other continents, of people on the continents, are enduring. It's not just heat waves, of course. We've got two storms following each other into across the Gulf of Mexico. Laura is intensifying very quickly. These are unprecedented times, and so people need to pay attention about what's going on. Often we only see what's going on in North America or perhaps Europe. But if you look at the storms in Asia and the flooding in Bangladesh and the droughts in Africa and the food insecurity in Ethiopia, I mean, everywhere, in every corner of the globe, except, as I said, Antarctica, we're faced with huge problems. We've just come out of the summer in Australia, where there are, as usual, terrible wildfires that killed tens of thousands, people say millions of animals. We've got a horrendous drought in the Murray-Darling water basin in the southeast of Australia. I'm going to show a picture of that. So everywhere you look, the situation is grim, frankly. But there are solutions to these problems, which I've written about. And so instead of just focusing on all the bad things that are happening, we need to look forward to the day when we can electrify the transport sector, the built environment, and start finally to draw down atmospheric levels of carbon dioxide. It's possible to do that.
Yes, and we'll talk about your book shortly. And we all know, and we see around us, that deforestation means carbon will be released in the air. We have less wildlife, the land will dry out. We see pollution around us, sort of plastic in the oceans, which heat up the water, everything else. But there are also voices who say that or claim that the Earth itself goes right now through a phase with increased frequency and through a kind of a funnel, which makes the atmosphere to heat up by itself. And our pollution and our intervention and what we do as a species is just a small fraction of the repercussion of this whole planetary movement. What do you say to that?
Well, you have to talk to scientists, the climate scientists, the mainstream scientists, the people in the university, Michael Mann, and the people that the peer-reviewed articles, not just listening to everything or looking at everything you're seeing on the media. If you really follow the mainstream scientists, the people in the universities in Europe and North America, you will understand what actually is going on. It's clear evidence that although in the past there have been enormous swings in atmospheric levels of carbon dioxide, for example, the present levels are the highest in 800,000 years. It's not so much the situation, which perhaps is unprecedented. If you go far enough back, as Kaz mentioned, you'll probably find something equally grim. But the problem now is that we are changing the situation so rapidly. That is what is unprecedented. The changes that we have wrought over the last 200 years, this is an experiment that we have never seen before. So that's the big difference. If you go back, in the beginning of time, you will find, the planet Earth in basically, horrendous temperatures and nightmarish levels of methane or carbon dioxide. But what we're doing now is unprecedented. There's no question at all that this is because of, human intervention, anthropogenic, intervention and changes that we are making in the environment.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I think that, well, definitely. We weren't alive back then when the situation was dire. There were no humans. So that should be a clue to us that we're not going to survive this if we keep going. As well, the whole thing about the planet heating up, I think they're saying it has to do with the solar flares and all that, but that's been disproven. So I've looked through research as well. I mean, you look at peer-reviewed research, and according to where we are right now, we should be cooling, and we're not cooling. So it's kind of, we're lucky we should be cooling. Otherwise, we'd be way, way warmer, way faster. So it's not it's a serious situation. We have to act. We can't keep the status quo. And it's not just what we're doing is burning fossil fuels. We're cutting down all the trees. We're getting rid of the greenery, even in the ocean. We're getting rid of all that, the coastlines, all that buffer zone that we have. The kelp forests and the seagrass, we're getting rid of that too. So it's just like we're taking and removing the filtration system and then adding more junk. So I don't know how someone can think that it's going to work. We're inside an atmosphere, like we're inside a bubble. So there's only so much we can do inside this bubble. It doesn't just take off into space.
Yeah, and along the same lines of filtration you just mentioned, I recently watched a TVO documentary that explained that in the middle of Mexico, they had an accidental spill of contaminated water and sludge from the nearby companies. And it was only once, it happened once, but there's a large amount of sludge and water. But it transformed over a period of 30 years. Nature transformed that sludge and that toxicity into a wetland that now it's pristine, attracts migratory birds, more animals, and a diverse flora. So if not pushed around and give it enough time, Mother Nature can heal all these bad lands or infested lands. Right now, as Martin said, the speed is so fast, the oceans don't have enough time to adjust to the toxicity we are putting into them.
Yeah.
And Martin, tell us more about your book and the solutions, and you might even want to start the short presentation you have.
Well, the book covers, it's unusual in the sense that there are lots of books about climate change, but this book covers both climate change and renewable energy. And renewable energy is really the only way to solve the present problems. It's the electrification of the transport sector, so you've no longer got all these emissions in the urban areas, no longer got these horrendous emissions into the atmosphere. You start with the electrification of the transport sector, the electrification of the built environment. Houses have to be super energy efficient. All this electricity, of course, has to come from solar, wind, geothermal, and hydro. It has to come from inexhaustible renewable energy sources. Sometimes we use the word renewable, sort of throw it left and right, but we tend to forget these are inexhaustible sources of energy, at least solar and wind, not so much bioenergy, that has to be carefully managed. But solar and wind are inexhaustible, at least in the time frame of Homo sapiens. So those are the kinds of solutions that I talk about in my book. There's a couple of chapters on, climate science and the situation, and then, a lot of detail about renewable energy, particularly solar and wind, the cost of which is descending quickly, and also the importance of battery energy. Solar and wind are intermittent. That was the big criticism of the sources of energy, that, oh, the wind doesn't blow all the time, and what are we going to do at night? Well, if you've got battery energy storage systems at megawatt scale, then you can handle the intermittency. So we already know the technical solutions that will allow us to draw down atmospheric levels of greenhouse gases. Should I start my little talk about water and climate change? Is that a good time?
Please, go ahead.
Now then, we have to make sure we can get this to work. Share screen. Clicking on share screen. And then...
So Penny, thank you for your comments, much appreciated.
Okay, just let me check that everybody can see this. Yes, can you hear me as well? Okay,
yes.
So I'm going to talk briefly about climate change and water. This is just one aspect, of course, of the impacts of climate change. Let's start with this. We all know how hot it's been, how hot it's going to get, and frankly, it gets tiresome. Every year, the meteorologists are telling us this is the hottest year on record. But unfortunately, it is absolutely true. It keeps getting hotter, and the last 5 years have been the hottest of all. And this year, it looks like this year, 2020, is going to be right up there, if not the hottest, maybe the second of the last 5 years. So, something is going on, and I think we all know what's happening. So let's focus on water. Now, the reason for this, where are we? Let me click again. Okay, we've got these guys coming up. So we're not going to talk about heat waves and forest fires and burning kangaroos and scorched koala bears. We're just going to focus more on water, which is the subject of the discussion this evening. So we have to start with the hydrological cycle. I think we all know generally how this works. Water runs around from the oceans, it's evaporated, it's vapor in the clouds, and then we get precipitation, and then it falls to land and runs out to sea, and this is the hydrological cycle. But something is happening to this cycle. It is becoming much more intense. So, and this is why, Kaz just mentioned this, the ocean is driving the hydrological cycle, and the temperature of the ocean just keeps on increasing. So the ocean absorbs most of the thermal energy, the excess thermal energy that's being reflected or driven into the Earth climate system by greenhouse gases, the greenhouse effect. And it's because of these increasing temperatures, ocean temperatures, that we are seeing both a disruption and an intensification of the hydrological cycle. So this is obvious. As the temperatures of the ocean increases, then we get more water vapor in the air. This has been measured. For every 1 degree increase, 1 degree centigrade increase in ocean temperature, you get 7%, actually atmospheric temperature, you get 7% more water vapor in the air. But that 1 degree, you don't often see 1 degree, it's more like 10. If you look at the increases in atmospheric temperatures over certain areas of land at certain times of the year, and with heat waves, etc. If that goes up 10 degrees, then you've got 70% more water vapor in the air. And that's generally what we're seeing, is a lot more water vapor in the air. Let me see if I can get to, hang on. Why won't this go away? I'm clicking on it. Oh, la la. Hang on a second, I've got to get rid of this. So let's come down to this one. Slideshow, start from current slide. Okay, so water vapor in the air, that's where we were. This is Phoenix, Arizona, 2016. This is called a microburst. There's nothing micro about this, is that it's absolutely huge. So you can see how the intensification of the hydrological cycle is producing really intense and destructive rainfall events. This is another one, a supercell with a column of rain. It looks absolutely supernatural. If you look at the bottom, I've got a pointer here, you see this tiny tree which gives you a sense of scale. So these kinds of events now are becoming increasingly frequent, increasingly intense. So globally, flood storms and extreme rainfall, we're seeing them occurring at least 4 times more often than this is the last 40 odd years. This is a photo from Bangladesh, where in flooding, of course, has a huge and disastrous impact on families. This woman in the front is carrying her goat. So this is the kind of human impact of this disruption to the hydrological cycle. This is a graph from MIT. There was some talk a few years ago. People said, "Oh well, maybe they're getting stronger, but there's no increase in frequency." This is not true. The latest information shows. Look along the bottom, that both the strength of the storms, hurricane category, and the frequency are in fact becoming, they are intensifying. So this is a graphic. The same, we've been talking about the evaporation from the ocean driving vapor into the atmosphere, but what's happening on the land? Because of course the same heat, atmospheric, air temperatures, surface air temperatures that are driving at the evaporation from the oceans are also driving evaporation from the land, and that means drought. This is the other side of the coin. What is bizarre perhaps or paradoxical about the hydrological cycle is that on the one hand you have increasing incidents, extreme weather dumping massive amounts of water leading to flooding. On the other hand, and often in the same areas, you have drought. So globally, the number of droughts has not risen. There's a reason for that, but the number of people impacted has increased enormously. Why hasn't the number of droughts increased? Because drought is a one-off event. You could have a drought that lasts 3 years and it just gets counted as one drought. But during that 3 years, the impact on the population, the regional population, is absolutely huge. Some people die, the animals die, a lot of people migrate, you get conflict. And so when we count drought as one event, it doesn't really tell you the enormous impact that drought is having. Most farmers can handle a drought of 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month, but they certainly cannot deal with a drought that lasts over a year. So just a few images. 2019 in France, there was droughts in Europe. This is in China. This river is almost dry, and this is a tributary of the Yangtze. This is in India, 2019. These drought conditions of drought, these drought events are absolutely in every area of the world. This one I was tracking at the time, Cape Town. Cape Town had a drought for 3 years. They practically ran out of water, and this is one of the largest cities in Southern Africa. And the impact was just absolutely devastating, not just on the urban areas, but of course on agriculture. This is in Australia. I mentioned this, the Murray-Darling Basin, huge area, huge agricultural area in Southeast Australia. Now the worst drought on record. This is a rancher in that area saying, I don't know if you can still read this, over extraction of water, because if you can't manage the downpours and you can't manage the drought, where do you turn? Well, you turn to groundwater. Every rancher, anybody who needs water is pumping out groundwater as rapidly, of course, as they can. So the demand for water is increasing, but the supply is dwindling. 70% of water goes for agriculture, about 30% for energy industry and animals, and about 10% for people. So agriculture, of course, and if you think about the global situation in agriculture, we're talking about subsistence agriculture, we're talking about food insecurity. Here's the situation with groundwater. If we can't manage the downpours and the periods of drought, then we start pumping out groundwater. So the situation with groundwater, this is Europe, but the situation is the same in northern areas of Africa, right from Libya or Tunisia right across to Egypt. The whole of the Middle East, the situation with groundwater is extreme. So the changing climate change is intensifying the hydrological cycle, both producing stronger storms, flooding, and more frequent and longer drought. So food insecurity globally is increasing. I've noticed this in North America, but it's certainly the case in Africa. This is Zimbabwe. We're in the situation now where 40% of the world's population is in a situation of water scarcity. So the global management of water supply and demand is simply one of the most challenging problems driven by the climate crisis. So there's my presentation about water and climate change.
Thank you very much, Marvin. Very interesting. It shows the repercussions of our actions. And if I may kind of summarize a little bit what you said by reading something from the back cover of Crystal Cloud. It says, the book brings to the forefront water's ability to heal us when treated with reverence and hurt us when treated with ignorance and disrespect, so prevalent in our society. So what you showed pretty much is the way we treat the water behavior based on our treatment and attitude towards water. And, through, again, climate change and all these meteorological events which affect us. And I want to take a second to thank those who are online right now, Cecilia, who make comments, Kirk, Emily, Deidre. So thank you very much, guys, for connecting and participating. So Kaz, what's your take on what Martin shared with us?
Yeah. Essentially, it's. I also have the inclination to think that the water problem is going to get worse because we're tapping into fossil water. So we're now bringing water that's not part of the cycle out into the cycle. So it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. So that fossil water won't be replenished. It will be out, just like fossil fuels, because the groundwater and the water table is so low, they've got to use these really long drills to tap into fossil water. And that's what's starting to happen. So the more we get droughts, the more we'll pull out this water, and we're going to put more water into the atmosphere. And then the storms are going to get even bigger. So that's got to go somewhere. And I think that's going to add to it as well. I'm not sure. What do you think, Martin? Does that make sense?
Yes, I've read about this. As we keep drilling down into groundwater, fossil water, yes, these are water supplies which have been there for aeons. So if you bring them into the system, you'll have more water in the hydrological cycle, and this inevitably means, with increasing temperatures, you would expect even more intense and frequent storms. So I think that's very much in the future, and it's in the very much in the near future.
Mm-hmm. And the same with our glaciers melting as well. We're bringing more of that in.
Yes, I haven't mentioned that in the 10 minutes, but if you look at it's a horror story, frankly. Greenland, all the latest data on Greenland shows how quickly it's melting. And then you've got the Thwaites Glacier. I don't know if you heard about this one. This is the so-called Doomsday Glacier down in the Antarctic. It's an enormous glacier which is now becoming increasingly unstable. There was a British expedition, I think perhaps a European expedition, perhaps 2 years ago. They've just been showing it on NOVA and some of those programs. It's reckoned to collapse in the next couple of years. That alone will raise sea levels by about 0.5 meter. And more worrying, that the Thwaites Glacier holds back, is reckoned to hold back, a whole bunch of other glaciers I think is west of the West Antarctic ice shelf. So the prognosis is not good at all. Yeah,
and we just lost our last Arctic shelf in Canada as well. It collapsed just recently.
Yeah,
I saw an article on that.
This is a scenario Craig Russell writes about in his book Fragment, and Nina Montano and I did mention it during one of our readings on the Age of Water podcast for this month, in fact. So people can go and listen to Nina reading and our discussion on that book. So Martin, on your presentation, there is a very tight connection between lack of water and lack of food. So it's a cycle which it does break down, then we are all in trouble. So the less water we have, less food we can produce. So that leads to starvation, unrest, and can spread not only in Africa, can spread, as you said, that we see in your slide, in Europe and North America as well. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, the situation that's pretty much a synopsis of the situation. Food insecurity, drought is the main problem with food insecurity, but even with, you know, reliable rain-fed agriculture, the increasing temperatures, the studies have shown that, you know, the productivity, the yields of the four main cereals diminish by 7, 8, 9%, rice and corn, and so even with adequate rainfall, just the increasing temperatures would reduce yields. But when you've got them, you know, this double whammy of increased temperatures and then periods of drought and then flooded fields, because this is what is so unusual about, you get these cycles of intense drought and followed by intense rainfall and flooding. So agriculture, certainly subsistence agriculture. I mean, a few years ago, California had a drought at the same time there was a drought in South Africa. California, of course, a very wealthy US state, you know, with the GDP right up there, higher than most countries. In fact, you know, they managed to ride it out with just spending lots and lots of money and advanced technology and all the means and resources at their disposal. They could handle it. So unfortunately, you know, you're going to see in Europe and North America, they will find enough money. They're wealthy enough to be able to handle and adapt to these situations. But in Africa and Southeast Asia, it's going to be enormously problematic and basically a disaster.
Yes, and you mentioned practical solutions in your book. Also, Drawdown is another book with which explains or brings forward like technologies which can be used in a practical way. But I want to switch to the invisible way, or the more intangible way of, you know, improving what we can do, or improving ourselves in order to understand that what we are doing is wrong. Because no matter the situation, looks like the oil and gas drilling still continues, the tar sands are still going strong, with some hiccups due to various viruses, but deforestation is still moving along. So unless, I think, we evolve ourselves as at a different level of consciousness, we won't be able to acknowledge that what we are doing is wrong. And Kaz and myself wrote about this intangible way of improving the way we are. So Kaz, do you want to start on that subject?
Start on the subject. Well, it's all about realizing that water isn't a resource. Water is actually some sort of being or entity, or maybe it's the actual underpinning of all of existence. So we're intertwined into this big web, and of which part we're water. And we're mostly water, and even our DNA is wrapped in water. I mean, we're discovering more and more and more that water permeates everything. So unless we can connect in some way to who we are beyond this physical form, we won't tap into, you know, the language of water like you're talking. Like Masaru Emoto took pictures of it, but you know, water speaks to you. And many indigenous cultures, especially in Canada as well, I mean, they've done the water walk around the Great Lakes, and they do their tobacco, they're offering to water, and they bless the water. And there's a reason to that. And there are many other cultures who do that as well. So they understand that there's the boundary between us as a flesh being and something else. There is no boundary. Water flows everywhere. It's in the air. It's like we're in it. We're in this big soup. So it's all about our ability to change our value system in a way that we don't value. I would say capitalism. Well, it's stuff that we don't need, that doesn't make us happy, that's destroying the environment. And just stop. Just refuse to buy things that you know you don't need, and you know it's not helping. It's hard. We have to change.
Yes, we have to change our mentality. And to write from the top of the back cover, I have to go back to this because it feels so good. It said, water was always on our side. We were the ones who strayed.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I was so inspired when I wrote the blurb of the back cover, and it fits perfectly with our discussion, and can start a debate in any circle about water and about how we treat water. So, Martin, any other comments based on your book? Something which can be, let's say, applied by everyone listening to this broadcast?
Well, I think so. The last chapter, I sort of take a theory of change approach based on the roadmap that the Europeans are following, which has the objective, like many countries, for what's called net zero emissions by 2050. This is the point where there are still emissions, but they are balanced by the natural sinks, which are the forests, if we still have them. It is absolutely essential to protect the forests and enlarge them, not just because they're a carbon sink, but because of the enormous biodiversity. You know, it makes up a huge percentage or a fraction of the life on the planet. So that is the objective. It's not just the Paris Agreement targets. There are lots of countries now which are committed to this objective, net zero emissions. That means drawing down. We haven't even flatlined emissions yet. We haven't even stopped increasing the emissions of these greenhouse gases. First phase, we have to flatline them. We have to level these out. And then we have to draw them down to the point where they're about roughly 20% of where the global levels are now by 2050. Can we do that? Absolutely, we can. And I think we all have a role to play. It's not just, you know, voting in elections once every 4 or 5 years. You can do a lot in the local community. The municipality in particular, we elect these councillors on the municipal councils who are responsible for the urban environment. And the urban environment is where a lot of the pollution starts. So the cars in the street, the natural gas that we burn in our houses, the industries that are on the peripheral areas, all of these systems and infrastructure are, a lot of them anyway, not all of them, some of them are provincial if we're talking about Canada, but a lot of them are under the purview and authority of the municipality. Now we elect these councillors. So if people get together, organize, you know, join environmental groups, lobby their councillors, follow what's going on in the council, not sure what's happening there, that we all have a role to play. So the first thing to do is to join an environmental group and see what's going on and start to get organized. Absolutely, we can make a difference.
Yeah, and talking about elections and the way politicians look at all these ideas which impact us on a daily basis. We talk about water, agriculture. I think that no matter the party which comes into power, these policies should be the same because they impact us directly. So the rights to clean water, the rights to good food should be in place no matter if it's an NDP, a conservative, a liberal, you know, Democrats or Republicans in US. Our rights to water and food should be protected through steady policies or blanket policies pretty much, which will be accepted by all parties and apply on each term, no matter who's leading us.
Yes, absolutely, that's the case. I mean, if you look at a lot of the Scandinavians and European systems, you know, they have multi-party systems, but they're all on board when it comes to climate change and what needs to be done. It's not politicized, it's not weaponized. All the parties, left and right, agree that protecting people, protecting their health, protecting the health of the country and the biodiversity in the forest, this is absolutely crucial. Nobody disagrees with this. There's a common, you know, there's a common program and belief that they can change, they can protect their countries, and we should be doing the same in Canada.
Yeah, I don't think we have enough strong policies on water protection and environment protection. And there are several books written by Canadian authors on this subject. And about the oceans, Ananda Mitchell wrote Seasick, and she went down in a submarine with scientists to check the status of the health of the oceans. So these are books which are very good to have and at least read once in your lifetime to understand how ecosystems work, what's important, how they break down based on conditions we have a direct impact on. So, Kaz, what is going to be the end result of your series? Are you going to change, reverse the state of the oceans, or you're going to keep them like that? I mean, some hints, please.
Okay. Well, what's going on right now is that there's a subculture called the Gadlins who are they have the society that does have a value system, that does value the planet and understands the interconnectivity and can speak to water and all that sort of stuff. They have been doing reparation experiments. So they're in the process of doing some experimentation and cleaning stuff up. So they have, in book 5, they have a city. The city in book 5 is actually one of their experimental areas where they actually have clean oceans and have brought back some animals, some marine mammals that they had frozen, and they had brought some back, and they're testing out, you know, see how they're doing, but that's hidden from the unification. So you got to hide it from the government because you don't want them to know that you're fixing stuff, or else they're going to come in and take it. So essentially that culture is really a combination. They're the descendants of our conscious cultures here, which would be indigenous cultures, activists. And the book does explain a bit of their background. As the series progresses, I provide more backstory about them and legends and their spiritual combination. And that all ties into their agenda, which is off to the side from the main unification. But then again, it's the old humanity versus inclusiveness versus greed. It's that whole problem that we keep fighting, ego versus non-ego, you know, that we keep fighting right now. And I'm not sure how we're going to get out of this. We need to evolve. That's just plain and simple.
The only solution.
Yeah, I'm thinking Eckhart Tolle, you know, that kind of awareness has to happen at an individual and like a global scale for us to finally realize that we don't have to play this rat race game where we buy stuff and throw stuff out and just constantly, you know, I don't know if this is gonna disappear on Facebook, constantly rape the environment, you know, that's one of those keywords, but yeah, that's what we're doing.
Yes.
So.
And a question from Penny. Is water like a deity? So Penny, water was revered by the indigenous people all over the world. It was precious. They prayed to it, and even in the Bible we know that some believe, some don't, that Jesus turned water into wine, and I think it was proved by other people that it's just structural, the molecular structure of water who changed at that time, and can be done even by highly trained individuals nowadays. Of course, they are not coming publicly saying that, but we know that there are people like that with those type of high vibration. So different cultures look at water from different angles, but they knew that water is life, and they treat it respectfully. Any other thoughts on this, Kaz?
Well, I'm not sure the deity part of water, because that's still putting water up on a pedestal, as opposed to realizing that we're all water. So we're in it. So we can, that's where the break is that we see ourselves as separate from. And because we're separate from, we can do stuff too. But if we're actually part of it, like one organism, then we realize that whatever we do to a piece of our organism has a ripple effect. Even if you don't experience it personally in your area, it ripples. It's a butterfly effect, you know, like the whole quantum entanglement and all that stuff. It all ripples. So that's, you know, the deity part is, I guess it's a ritualistic, but it's beyond that, I think.
Correct. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Martin, any thoughts on the same question?
Well, it's certainly true you know, the water is life. It's a bit of a cliche perhaps, but there's no question about it. And you know, there's a reason this planet is the blue dot. You know, the blue planet is because of the water. And if we pollute that water, if we destroy it and ruin it and boil it, there's no question that eventually, you know, life on Earth will disappear. So protecting the water resources is absolutely key. There's no one solution to this climate crisis. It requires a whole raft, a whole portfolio, a whole series of action of protecting the different elements of the environment. But certainly water is one of the key ones.
Yeah, and another practical advice, which I may mention in the past for everyone who listening, even when we drink water, even if you have a filtration system, I know it might sound silly, but before you drink it, just say a prayer, say, I love you, you are wonderful. And that molecular structure, the molecular structure of water will change, and you will put inside your body more alive water than the dead water which you might get from the tap. It's clean water, no doubt about that, because the municipalities take care of that, but still it doesn't have the same vividness of the water from a spring, from outdoors. So try that exercise and see how you feel, or just stick a positive word on your water bottle, like love, gratitude, empowerment, and you'll see a difference. Am I right, Kaz?
Yeah, that's definitely what Masaru Emoto was looking and taking the proof for. It's because we emit energy, and our thoughts. You feel it when someone's in the room. Like you will enter a room and you'll go, ooh, you know, some bad juju going on here. And we're mostly water, so our body's reacting to it. And so it kind of makes sense to think of water itself as reacting to you. Like you're not separate. You're in this space together, but we just can't really measure it. I mean, some people are starting to measure it, but we can't really measure all of that.
Yes. And we are towards the end of this virtual launch. Any final thoughts, Martin?
No, I think, you know, we're in this for the long haul, aren't we? This is a real struggle that is going to continue. You know, we're watching the election in the United States and hoping that we don't have another 4 years of you know who, because it just shows you when, you know, this is all related to what I call regulatory capture. You know, when the oil and gas industries, they started off by lobbying, but of course then they figured out, well, why do we have to lobby? Why don't we just get our people on board? And so you elect your politicians and you get them on the regulatory agencies, and before you know it, you know, you're basically controlling the way that the way things are moving forward. And it's not just in America. I've just been reading a book about the Canadian, you know, Association of CAPP in Alberta. Pretty much Alberta is a petro state. You know, it's a little mini one. So as long as we have these situations where people are just looking for the maximum amount of revenue from the maximum amount of extraction, we're just going to have horrendous problems. So finally, it comes down to the ballot box. We have to get people in power, people in government, in the regulatory agencies that are really committed to changing things around. So that's part of the solution. And individually, of course, we can make certain behavioral changes which will improve the situation as well.
Yeah, thank you. Kaz?
Definitely. There's something to be said about us as individuals working in community. And it also is an economic situation as well, because of the disparity. The people who cannot afford to make the choices that are expensive, because they're expensive choices right now, everything is geared for anything made of plastic and anything made, you know, from the oil industry, because it's so subsidized. Those people keep buying. And they don't have a choice because they have to live day to day. So we need a way of rebalancing all of that and being local, like buy local and grow your local stuff and share local and find out who makes your food and build that community connection.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to turn back to Krista Cloud. And before we conclude, I want to read a couple of testimonials. from people I value. From Jonas Saul, the author of the Sarah Roberts series, a unique writer voice, a refreshing storyline, and a future that we may all see before too long. Tension, pace, and real-life issues make this a novel to read. Wow, what a story. And the second one by Ian Prattis, author of Shattered Earth and many eco-fiction books, and a scholar. Claudiu Murgan establishes his latest book, Crystal Cloud, with his prior brilliant novel, Water Entanglement. The significance of water is of manner through which it changes molecular structures to spur the health of the earth and the humans who abuse it. Crystal Cloud provides a thrilling continuity. It shows an increased consciousness to crystal implants in the human brain so that the degradation of humanity on earth is overcome and the new paradigm takes over the planet. The intricate tale provides an excellent read. The author brings in a possible retrofit for our future. Bravo. So thank you all who had the chance to read the book in advance. And on my website, you can find, I'll share my screen right now, where it is. Let's see here. You can go on my website, click on books, Crystal Cloud, and you see all the links where you can purchase the books, Kobo, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, iBooks, at all major retailers. So you can do that. So thank you very much, everyone. We'll do the draw right now. So Theo will help me with two names. So stay tuned. Let's do. Okay, give it to me. So the first one goes to Penny Boyer. Thank you, Penny. See, you are rewarded for your comments. Thank you. And the second one goes to Kalin Giurgiu. Wow, thank you. And Kalin is one of those who promoted my book and shared on his network. So thank you, both of you. Thank you, everyone. Martin, Kaz, always a pleasure talking to you. And those who watch us, please share this recording. It will be posted on my website. Go buy the book. Right now, the audio version is being produced. So will be available at the end of October. In the meanwhile, you can try the ebook and the physical copy from all those booksellers I mentioned. So until next time, love and gratitude, everyone.
Okay.
Bye. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.